Thank you for having me here. Just doing a quick voice check. You able to hear me all? Good? At the back as well? Nice. Okay. So I'll take about 30 minutes here to talk a little bit about this topic here. And in the interim, I'll take you to quite a few different places in the world, the places where I have been to and the stories associated with that. Let's go to New York first. This was a couple of months back. I was in an Uber ride from LaGuardia Airport to Manhattan. We had some meetings over there, so I took an Uber ride. And the Uber driver, his name was Mike. Now, Mike was a 75-year-old man, a very chatty gentleman, who used to talk to all his riders. So we struck a conversation, a nice one at that. We started talking about a few things he knew about India, a few that I knew about America, right? And we struck up a good rapport. And as we started entering Manhattan, I became curious about his journey, and he became curious about mine. So Mike was 17 years old when he actually joined a mail room in one of the corporate basements in Manhattan. Now, for those of you who don't know what mail room is, this used to be at the basement of these big high-rises of corporate offices in Manhattan, and that is where human beings used to sort emails. Sorry, the mails, not the emails, the physical mails, right? That's their full-time job. So what they would do, they would have this bulk physical emails coming in, they will sort the emails, and then they will take it up to the right executives, right? This is the first job that Mike started doing when he was 17 years old. He did that job for 10 years, right up to mid-70s, and that's when the whole email thing started coming in. Now see, Mike is a very smart man. He saw that coming, and he thought, and I told himself, you know what, I can't just keep doing this thing because this job will not exist anymore, right? So he went up the ladder, a couple of floors actually, and he became the admin assistant of the executive that he was serving, right? So he changed his job over there, right? He did that for 25, 30 years, and then when that executive retired, right, Mike had to figure out a new job because he didn't have a patron in the organization. Mike ended up, and this was the time of starting 2000s, the new e-commerce thing was coming up on the scene. And Mike said, you know what, I knew a thing or two about parcels and moving things around and all that. So he joined a distributor, a third-party distributor, and started doing picking, parceling, things like that and all, right? Well, then Mike became too old, and he said, oh, you know what, I can't do this physical stuff anymore. And he became an Uber rider. Uber driver, I mean, right? And he has been riding for, I think, almost 10 years now. He was pretty good, pretty happy at that, learned about what I have done in AI and all. I couldn't help myself asking just before I got off, Mike, aren't you scared that you have this full self-driving capability coming up very soon? It's already happening in Bay Area and a couple of other cities. What will happen to your job when that happens? You know what Mike told me? Mike said, you know what, Shashank, I have had many disruptions in my life, long life, 50 years, right? And I've always figured a way out by one way or the other. Then he takes a pause and says, you know what? On the side, I'm learning some Python coding as well, right? So this is a 75-year-old guy, right, who's driving Uber, right, and trying to learn a little bit of Python coding on the side, just in case he might need it, right? Now that's the story of Mike, an Uber driver in New York, Manhattan, right? And that's the first thing we need to confront as leaders, right? Which is that is this a fear? Is it a disruption? Is it an opportunity, right? And I think if you were to believe Mike, right, for him and for many others, this is more an opportunity than a fear. Yes, there have been reports that the jobs will move, the jobs will get lost, but there are a lot more opportunities that will get created. After this, all the BI, as we know, will go away. Well, 13 years later, the BI still exists. Nothing has gone away, right? Another example that is very, very favorite of mine is an example of Hadoop. How many of you know about Hadoop? A quick show of hands. Yeah? Right? If I had the same question about 10 years back, right, everybody would know about Hadoop. Yeah? Now, back then, in 2013, 2014, 2015, moving into Hadoop, moving your data into Hadoop is an example of modernization. Today, we work with many of our customers who want to take the data out of Hadoop. And for them, that is modernization. Yeah? Now imagine there is an analyst, an engineer, right, for who the job description was to know Hadoop. And that's it. Yeah? What will happen to that engineer today? Imagine a second engineer whose job description, right, is to ensure that the enterprise data is delivered to the business in the right shape, form factor, and quality. What will happen to the second analyst? Clearly, the first engineer will have far fewer opportunities than the second engineer. Now, that's an important classification. As leaders and as practitioners, it's important to not define our jobs by the skill sets that we possess. It is important to define our jobs by the outcome those skill sets will deliver. And those outcomes are business outcomes. And no matter what the skill set you would have, and no matter how the skill set changes, those business outcomes and those business needs are going to stay for a long time. And as leaders, that is our second biggest responsibility, to ensure that we ourselves and our teams do not define our jobs by the skill sets, but we define our jobs by the outcomes. Do that investment in GenAI and all that. I was reading some news in Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks back, right? It said that, in 1 year alone, there have been about $200 billion investment into buying chips. Yeah? As against that, the investment into building the software and services to use that chip has been less than $5 billion. Imagine the disparity. And then imagine the opportunity, right? And that's the world in which we live today, where many of those chips will need the right software and solutions and services to drive business outcomes. Now, I'll ask one question. Actually, I'll ask a series of questions, and please respond by show of hands. How many of you know, how many of you can drive a four-wheeler? Just a quick show of hands, right? Fantastic. OK. How many of you have driven a Ferrari? No, I haven't either. Yeah, right? OK. How many of you have driven a Formula 1 racing car? Anybody? No? Yeah? Right, I would have thought so. So let's go to Abu Dhabi. Right? In Abu Dhabi, there is a racing circuit called Yes Marina. Right? Anybody has been there? Yes Marina, yeah? Right? OK, it's a beautiful circuit. So I happen to be there, right, just for the fun of seeing how the Formula 1 racing car looks from inside. They did not allow you to drive, It's a fairly complex piece of machinery, right? It can hit you with a lateral acceleration of almost 5G. Experts tell me that the drivers who drive a full circuit, right, and when they're racing, the engine becomes so hot that it goes up to 50 degrees Celsius, and they end up losing about 5% of their body weight just in sweat. The reaction time is extremely quick, right, and all of those things, yeah? Now, imagine you have that Formula 1 car, right, and it is given to us, right, all of us, and we're driving it on the road right outside. How will that work? That will be quite a chaos, as you can imagine, right? The current traffic rules, the quality of the road, our own driving habits, right, essentially disqualify us from using Formula 1 car, yeah? Formula 1 car needs a very special racetrack, the right embankments, the right pit stops, the right speed breakers, the right technicians and mechanics, and a very different ecosystem, right, to be able to run a Formula 1 car. Now, you might be wondering, we aren't here to talk about racing. What has Formula 1 to do with this conversation? Well, you know what? GenAI is no different from Formula 1. It's the same thing, right? And it's very similar, right? GenAI, right, has a power of a Formula 1 car, right? And that has been the evolution of our math and analytics, right? When we started, it was all heuristics, right? Expert-driven code, which is fine. We moved from there to regression, where we had some equation which we can define. We had variables, all of that, good things in life, we were good. Then came machine learning, where there was no equation. You just define the variables, and the algorithm will find the right equation. Then came the neural nets, right, where there can be no equation. And then finally, today, we have large language models, right? Large language models, right, are a non-incremental leap, right, into the future, right? And that is the reason why, as leaders, right, we need to not just understand that GenAI, right, is that Formula 1 car, right, which needs special driving skills, which needs special traffic regulations, which needs a special racing track, It needs a full ecosystem and a platform for GenAI to become successful. This is not just a skill set game, right? And we have to look at it from this broadened and expanded scope of responsibility. So those are a couple of things I'll leave you to think with. Now, having said that, right, there are 4 things that I would want to stress on real quick in terms of tech literacy, accountability, workflow orchestration, and responsible AI, right? Let's talk about the literacy a little bit, yeah? And how do we solve the problem? We all are good at numbers, I would assume, and those numbers would tell me that a good 80%, right, of leaders have very limited or no familiarity with generative AI. Yeah? And we are supposed to lead teams who do generative AI. We are supposed to lead teams who consume the output of generative AI, right? So that is the reality in which we live. How do we change that? This is really moving on its own. Okay, how do we change that? We can't go to university and learn generative AI 101, right? Because this is not about knowing the math of generative AI. This is about knowing the applications of generative AI. I'll give you an example. We work with this. This is really moving on its own. Okay. We work with this a telecom company based in US, right? And they had this need on how can we educate the business leaders, about the AI and Gen AI and all of those things, right? So we conducted an event, and this event has been running for 5 years now. In 5 editions of that has gone out. It's called Ideathon. Now, Ideathon is not a hackathon like a coding event, okay? It's not meant for the geeks. It's actually meant for the business users. You know what Ideathon does? Ideathon goes to the business executives and asks them to come up with the business ideas, okay? And this could be anybody in any function. And then these business idea owners will work with a team of analysts who will support them to see if the data can justify the business case of solving that problem. That is it. You're not actually solving the problem. You're just exploring the feasibility of solving the problem. And then, basis the business case, the idea gets presented into a Shark Tank type setup, which is steered by the CIO and the CXO and other executives and all that, right? And then the winning idea gets a funding. The magical thing about this process is that it teaches the leaders the art of possible, right? It is not the art of how to do the prompt engineering or fine-tuning or a RAG-based framework or a forward propagation or a backward propagation. It's nothing to do with that. It's about just knowing the art of possible, right? And that is the fundamental construct of literacy, right, that we need to enable ourselves and our organizations. That's point number 1. But that's not the only thing. The second element after tech literacy is the human-machine collaboration, right? And look, I think the last speaker, I had a privilege of hearing him the last 5 minutes, was running a bit late, and I heard him saying rightly that if you can, describe your job, right, as 5 or 10 points, right, and if it's very predictable, and if I can give that job sheet to any graduate and that person can do it, then that job can be automated and should be automated, right? And that's all good, and that will happen, right? Now, there are 2 types of jobs, 2 categories of jobs, which are very interesting, which I don't think can be automated. So be with me, and let's travel to, where should we go to? Let's go to Portugal. Yeah? We go to Lisbon, right? So I found myself in Lisbon a couple of years back. We were working with this CPG company, right? And they had these sales reps on the ground, right? They will go out and take the orders, right? So they'll go to the shop, take the order, and then submit the order, and then the stock comes in to the shelf and all of those things, right? The typical route to market thing, right? The problem was that the stores that they visit, right, were a set of static stores. This was not a dynamic, smart recommendation. So our job was to build a recommendation system which is dynamic, which is smart, right, and can tell the right set of stores to the sales reps so that they can put more orders by visiting lesser number of stores. Very, very, common optimization kind of a problem, right? Now, how would you want to do that, right? We would look at the data, we'll start doing the math, we'll start, building the models, algorithms, and all that, right? Well, we did not start with that. The way we started with is that we went to Lisbon, we sat with the sales force, sales reps, and we went into the beats with them. Now, what's a beat? A beat is a route when the sales starts a day, sales rep starts a day, goes to store 1, store 2, store 3, store 4. That's called a beat, right? So we went with them to the beat, right? And a couple of things happened in that process. Number one, right? Once in a while, they were also carrying some inventory with them, right? So once in a while, we found ourselves carrying the crates, right, into the store, right, which is very helpful because that is like a human help given to the sales rep who's anywhere running around, right? But more importantly, it helped build the trust and the relationship, right? That became very important, and AI cannot do that, yeah? And that was critical because whatever solution we are going to build, right, it has to be eventually be used by the same sales reps, right? And by using that sales rep, by using that solution, their payout will get determined. So it is a question of their livelihood, by the way. For us, it's a question of the algorithm. For them, it's a question of the livelihood, right? So what do? We go there, we work with them, we build relationships, right? That is where the human-to-human exchange happens. Extremely critical if you want our algorithms and solutions to be adopted on the ground, not just in the boardrooms. One more thing happened, which is very interesting. So we figured that in the second half of the day, when the sales reps are going around, meeting the stores and all that, sometimes, so they have to do the check-in, right? So for example, I'm store 1, I go to the store, I do the check-in, right? OK, I am at the store, so it's done. OK, good. What started happening was, the second half of the day, right, there were all of these stores nearby, and they would actually not do the check-in, right? As in the sense they will do the check-in on the app, but they will not physically visit the store. Because the store was nearby, yeah? Now you see the problem with that. The problem with that is, purely from the data perspective, what will the data tell you? The data will tell you that the sales rep visited the store and the order is 0. But what really happened was, the sales rep never really visited the store. And no amount of AI or GenAI or any type of AI will ever tell you that. Only a human interaction will tell you that, right? Now, once we discovered that, we of course built a solution which was not just a smart algorithm, but was also a smart process change, where we said that as part of the process, the sales reps have to go into the store, right, and actually scan the barcode on the cabinet where they're going to put the inventory. And you can't do that from outside. You have to go in the store, right? So these are the kind of things, right, which is the change management, understanding the human nature of the process, which AI cannot do. That only we can do, that only human beings can do, right? And that is where the human-machine collaboration becomes very important, right? And let me tell you one thing. In our industry, the biggest value destruction, the biggest destruction of value happens not because the models are poor, not because the insights are not there. It's because the human change management is missing. So that is second thing. The premium on human change management becomes extremely important. The third thing, accountability and recognition, in the machine and AI-driven outcomes. Who do you blame? Do you blame the analyst who built the algorithm? You blame the AI, right? There is example right here of Tesla, right? There have been some, inadvertent accidents and incidents that have happened, right? When Tesla was being driven in FSD mode, which is full self-driving mode, and Tesla has taken accountability of some of those, right? And that's a question for us to understand as well, right? As to who actually takes the accountability, right? When your AI is in production, when your Gen AI is in production, right? And that's a very critical thing, particularly when the production is mission critical. And that is where, right, we have been working with the, in developing this field of LLM ops, right? Now, what LLM ops really does is ensures that the algorithms that are in production, right, are moving within the boundaries of the governance and the guidelines, right? The drifts that are happening are accounted for and explained for, right? That's a very important thing. The last thing, right, is about the ethical and responsible AI, right? And this has been, in conversation quite a bit, right? And, there have been instances, right, including, one of the largest banks out there where the local regulatory body summoned them because they thought that their mortgage application process was biased, such that that if they're two individuals the same credit score, the one with the one of color will probably have a lower probability of acceptance than the Caucasians, right? And then, of course, they defended that and all those things, right? The question is, how do we solve this problem, right? And that is where using AI to govern AI, right, is a good solution, but using human plus AI to govern AI, right, is probably a better solution. And there have been multiple constructs to solve that problem. It's an evolving field, but it's important. So now, if we just summarize the whole thing, what all have we discussed today? Mike tells us, the Uber driver, Mike tells us that the problem is not a loss of job. The problem could be the loss of ingenuity, right? The problem could be the loss in our inability to see the opportunity, right? Because there will always be an opportunity, which will always be there. The Formula One example tells us, right, that this is not just about building the right algorithm. This is about knowing that GenAI is a quantum leap, right? It's a Formula One car, right? It needs a different traffic signal, different roads, different racetrack, maybe slightly different drivers, right? Or better drivers, right? Maybe we have to learn and become better, right? Things like that, right? We also talked about how we can run ideathons to learn the art of possible as business leaders, right? We talked about the need for, combining the human-machine collaboration, where humans do what they do best, which is to understand other human beings, right? And which helps drive change management, right? We talked about the problem of accountability, right? That's why we need LLM ops. We need all sorts of guidance and governance in production. And finally, we talk about responsible AI. Now, with that, I'll probably just end real quick, right, by quick things that, see, the world around us is changing. That's for sure, whether you want it or not, whether you like it or not, right? I think today we live in a world, right, where we have a lot of these, what's the name? Tony Starks, right, with a lot of these Iron Man suits, right? And we need to lead them, we need to become like them, right? And that is a true future. And I think, right, what Mike convinced us, quite well, that out there what lies is a lot of opportunity, right? And not a sense of loss, but a sense of plenty and a sense of abundance. I believe, right, and this is my personal belief, that GenAI will ensure that the human intellect is going to be used more and more for which it is evolved. And that is creativity and innovation. And as leaders, we need to become that and enable that in the teams that we lead. Thank you.